Hi, I'm Bridget. Welcome to my kitchen where I elevate the everyday with inspiring recipes that are doable for any cook. I love the versatility of dips, how they can travel from dip to condiment, think burger toppings, to a slather for chicken or fish. That's what's in store today. Quick dips that double or triple as condiments and toppings. Versatile and unexpected, not your grocery store variety, but filled with familiar ingredients. The dips we're making today are off the beaten track, filled with delicious surprises, but not complicated. One with walnuts and roasted red peppers, another with pumpkin seeds and cilantro, and a chunky olive tapenade. All are quick to put together with the help of a food processor. We'll start with the roasted red pepper and walnut dip. The walnuts give it great substance and make it more nutritious. I'm using a heaping half cup of toasted walnut pieces. And to that, I'm adding a third of a cup of breadcrumbs. I'm using panko, but you could use regular breadcrumbs. And I'm going to add 1 clove of garlic. Sometimes I'll put up to 3 cloves of garlic, but a dip with raw garlic is pretty pungent to begin with, so I find that 1 clove gives it lots of flavor. And I'm just going to whir those until the walnuts are chopped into little pieces. Next, we'll add 1.5 cups of chopped roasted red peppers. And these are just roasted red peppers in a jar. Nice and easy. You could always roast your own, grill them, char them under the broiler, but the jarred red peppers are really great and so simple. I'm just going to whir those until it becomes a bit of a paste. And then we can add the remaining ingredients. About a tablespoon of lemon juice. If you want more lemon after, it's one of these things. Once we get the basic recipe made, then we can decide, or I can decide if I want more salt or more lemon. But I've got about a tablespoon of lemon. I'm adding a teaspoon of ground cumin and a generous pinch of red pepper flakes, so you can make it as hot as you want. And about a half a teaspoon of salt. And finally to that, I will add a third of a cup of olive oil, starting with a third of a cup of olive oil, and then I'll see if I want to add up to 2 more tablespoons. I'm just going to scrape down the edges here. I want this to retain a little bit of texture. You could puree it until it's completely smooth, but I prefer it when it just still has a little bit of that walnut and red pepper texture. And we'll just taste it. It will develop the flavor more over a day. I'm going to add a little bit more heat. But it's salty enough and the cumin flavor comes through nicely. So I'll give it 1 more little whir and then we'll be ready. It has a bit of a silky texture thanks to the roasted red peppers. Roasted red pepper and walnut dip is good on its own, served over crackers. It's also delicious dolloped over goat cheese, and you can serve it alongside fish or chicken, so it really is versatile. I'll watch the food processor for our next dip, a zesty pumpkin seed pesto. Pumpkin seeds are so nutritious. They're great for nibbling, but they're a little bitter too. The bitterness is well balanced in this recipe by the cilantro, lime, and garlic. We'll start with half a cup of toasted pumpkin seeds, and I'm going to whir those with 1 clove of garlic and a little bit of salt. Now for the cilantro. This recipe uses a full 3 cups of chopped cilantro. And because everything is getting whirred in the food processor, I use the stems as well. There's lots of flavor in the stems, so no need to put them in the compost. I'm just going to roughly chop this cilantro so I can measure it. They're not packed cups, or not firmly packed cups. I'll chop a little bit more. Now, some people find cilantro tastes and smells a little soapy, but when you mix it with garlic and lots of lime juice and the pumpkin seeds, all those different flavors balance out really well. I do love that I can use the stems in this recipe so they don't go to waste. On top of the cilantro, I'm going to add a pinch of heat. I'm using piri piri spice, the Portuguese spice. You could add cayenne if you'd like, or crushed red peppers. Anything with a little bit of smokiness is really nice in this recipe. On top of that, I'm going to add the juice of 1 lime. I like this dip with a really pronounced lime flavor, so that's why I use a whole lime. If you want, you can start out with just half a lime and then taste from there and decide if you want to add more juice. This is a very juicy lime. So I've got, I would say, at least 2 tablespoons in there. Then a pinch of salt, just 1/4 teaspoon. And a 1/4 cup of olive oil. We'll start with a 1/4 cup. If you want it a little more liquidy, I guess you could say, you could add more olive oil, but just a tablespoon at a time. So I'll whir this. I'll have to scrape down the sides a couple of times. It smells so good with the toasted pumpkin seeds. They have this great aroma. I like the texture of this with the olive oil, that amount of olive oil and that amount of the lime juice, because it makes it so it's not so much a paste. Just like the roasted red pepper walnut dip, I like to keep a good amount of texture in my dips. This, again, you could puree it, but just having a little bit of texture with the seeds is great on the palate. I'm just going to taste this, see if it needs any adjustments. Nice and zingy with the lime, and there's a good amount of heat. So at this point, really, you could add more cilantro if you like. You could add more pumpkin seeds if you like. Sometimes when I make this recipe, I use a full cup of pumpkin seeds, and it's like a paste, almost like a firm spread. So it really depends how you want to use it and the flavor profile that you like. Like the roasted red pepper dip, this pesto is so versatile. You can add it to tacos. The cilantro is just so great in Mexican dishes. You could serve it with fish, alongside grilled chicken, and sometimes I like to serve it just with nacho chips. Our final dip of the day isn't really a dip. It's a marinated goat cheese. I call it loaded goat cheese. This is a recipe from my friend Deanne. It's delicious and gorgeous. We're just making a half recipe today. You can use the full recipe if you're going to serve a big gathering. Like the other recipes, this can be made a couple of days in advance. In fact, this one gets better with age because we have a drizzle, a dressing that's going to go on top that will soak into the goat cheese over a couple of days. There's lots going on flavor-wise in this recipe. The tang of fresh goat cheese is just so great with the pungent flavor of olives. Not to mention the fresh garlic in the dressing that will drizzle over top. We're starting with 6 ounces of fresh goat cheese. I put it in the freezer for about 10 minutes because I want to slice it. Now it's going to be messy slicing regardless, but it does make it just a little bit easier. And I will plate it right off the bat. This is kind of a 3-step recipe, starting with the cheese. And then I'm going to make a mixture, the tapenade, with the olives and sun-dried tomatoes. And then I'm going to make a dressing that I'll drizzle over top. Now I'm only cutting this goat cheese to make it a little easier when people are eating it. So it's already broken up. So don't worry that it's getting kind of messy. Now to make the topping, we want 2 tablespoons of chopped or minced black olives. I like to use Kalamata olives, but any kind of black olives work in this recipe. If you're making the full batch, you could always do this step in the food processor. The one thing to remember is that you want it to retain some texture. You don't want it to become a paste. So that's why I'm doing this by hand. One of the things I love about this recipe is that you really can make it 2 or 3 days ahead of time. Step 3 is pouring over a balsamic vinaigrette, and that is kind of the marinade part of the marinated goat cheese. And over a couple of days, it will really soak in to the goat cheese and add a lot of flavor throughout. So that is about 2 tablespoons. We'll use 2 tablespoons of green olives as well. And if you can't find pitted olives, black or green, you can always just cut the flesh off the pit yourself. Now to the olives, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of chopped sun-dried tomatoes. These are sun-dried tomatoes in oil. You can use any kind of sun-dried tomatoes, but what I love about the tomatoes in oil is that they retain a beautiful red color. The other sun-dried tomatoes I find are really kind of a deep color and they blend in with the olives. But you'll see when we topple this over the goat cheese with the colors of the olives, this beautiful red from the tomatoes, and then freshly shredded basil, it really is beautiful. Now the final step in this topping is to shred some basil to add to the olive mixture. This is freshly washed basil, and I'm just choosing the biggest leaves because I want to chiffonade it. So it's a tidy way to shred it. I'll just stack the leaves together. Maybe just 3 at a time, and roll them. And then shred them. Basil is so tender, it bruises easily. So this is a nice way to cut basil without bruising it. So we'll want 2 to 3 tablespoons of basil. Oh, and fresh basil smells so great. So I'm going to mix some of the basil in. So see all the colors and textures going on here? It's really so beautiful. I'm just going to topple this over the goat cheese, and we'll split some of these whole pieces. There we go. And just going to sprinkle it over liberally. If you didn't want to go to the next step with the dressing, you could always just drizzle over some olive oil, add a little bit of cracked black pepper, and you could serve it as is. But there's balsamic vinegar in the dressing that we're going to make, and it just adds an extra tang that is really beautiful with this. So we'll move on to the dressing. The final step is to make our balsamic vinaigrette, starting with 1.5 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. To that, I will add 1 garlic clove, not a large garlic clove, because it'll be very pungent on top of all these other flavors. And then I have 1/2 teaspoon of dried thyme, 1/2 teaspoon of dried rosemary. If you wanted to use fresh instead, you could use 1/2 tablespoon of each. We'll mix that in. And then 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Remember, we don't need salt because of all the olives, and the cheese is salted too. And then lots of freshly ground black pepper. Just put the lid on, give that a good shake. And we'll drizzle that over our cheese mixture. Our marinated goat cheese is ready to serve. Now, if you'd like, you could drizzle it with a little bit of honey to add a bit of sweetness, but it is delicious as is. The olive mixture is so versatile. It's great with cod or chicken, and it's a delicious condiment alongside anything that's tomato-based. I think of dips more as condiments, mixtures that can be put to use in all sorts of ways. They're convenient and easy to make. Trying some different variations, like the 3 we made today, is a nice way to add oomph to a meal. And they bring a bit of the unexpected to your usual spread of dips at gatherings. I hope you get a chance to try them at your home too. Thanks for watching. Enjoy.